Before we begin, we will have a short lecture to acknowledge the intelligence, truthfulness, and problem-solving skills of the average person.
You know, some things in this discipline are actually really easy to quantify. You can come up with a hypothesis, you can perform some testing and kind of pit theory A against theory B, and with a little amount of effort and a relatively small expense, you can come up with a very definitive answer on which is better. Now, you can do this oftentimes with products, you can do this with techniques or processes, and this is how most people will go about finding the truth of things. So, troubleshooting methodology, essentially, right? You identify your problem or you identify the area that you'd like to improve in, and you formulate some theories and set about doing tests to reveal what is going to be the best. Yet, we've got a problem, don't we? And that is, in this modern world, everyone seems to value money more than they value anything else. And if there's any one thing that can get someone to abandon the truth entirely, it is money. I've never understood this principle because what is right or what is correct or what is the best solution for a specific problem tends to be that way regardless of cost. Despite the fact that everyone seems to have some concept of that, depending on what we're talking about, people will just arbitrarily choose that they're going to ignore all of that and anchor into a belief that is absolutely false, only to make themselves feel better about not having to spend some money. Think of what would happen for a second if you removed the financial aspect from all decision making when it comes to product purchases. Well, folks, we wouldn't have a budget brand. We wouldn't have budget products. We would only have the best. We would literally not have anything other than maybe one or two or three of the very best options to solve some very specific problem. But because we are in a capitalist society, the financial element is first and foremost on most people's minds. I have other videos where I talk about the spiritual significance of making sure that you do not think that way, but I'd encourage you to go watch those. It's outside the scope of this video. The important thing here is to acknowledge the fact that people allow financial concerns to cloud their judgment on a daily basis. Some people are affected more than others, but this is a hardened fact. So what I'm driving at here is that there are hardened truths, right? Facts that are not disputable, but if you're not intelligent enough, you could pretty much dispute anything. Now, some of you watching this video have no doubt run afoul of some of those people in the past. And hey, what can you do? It's not like you can reason with them. They don't have the ability to be reasoned with. They can't understand what you're saying. And so there's very little point in arguing with them. Now, there's another factor to this, and that is if someone has already formed an opinion, whether that opinion be supported by facts or just something that they feel on a whim, doesn't change the fact that once the decision has been made to feel a certain way about something, the likelihood of them changing it is very slim. Most people just simply will not change their opinions no matter what evidence they get presented with. Point in fact, there's well-documented research that says the more evidence that you provide counter to their view, the less likely they are to believe you. Now, let me say that again. That means the more facts that you provide to someone that holds a contrary opinion to your own, the less likely they are to change their opinion. It is for those reasons that I will not be trying to prove anything to anyone on this video. I'm not going to have some elaborate testing. I'm not going to put 500 rounds downrange in 7 different barrels, all manner of different powders and charge weights. And bottom line, the amount of testing that I would have to devote myself to really quantify the feelings that I'm going to share about the Prometheus on this video would take me 10 years and probably $500,000 in components. And When I got to the end of that, now here's the part that really makes me upset, and I mean genuinely irritates me. Even if I did that, and I got to the end of it, and I provided a lot proof, and I mean if I chased down every single variable and provided evidence of the fact that it's the most conclusive test that has ever been done in the history of man, and it showed that the Prometheus was indeed the best powder measure on the face of the earth, a whole bunch of you out there would argue that that is an invalid test, or that my parameters for the test were not good. Or you would simply just put in the comments and say, that's stupid. Duh. This falls into the category of something you're either going to get or you won't get. And if you don't get it, it's not like I'm going to be able to explain it to you in a way that will all of a sudden miraculously cause you to get it. You either have the faculty of logical deduction on your own, or you don't. Now, we're all built in different ways, and we have different skill sets, and some of us are very logical, while others are very illogical. I have no intention of trying to change who you are just by simply watching this YouTube video. However, for those of you watching this, it would do very well for you to understand who I am. Now, there are countless examples of the kind of shooting that I am capable of on our YouTube channel here. Then we have the many, many first-hand accounts of people that have traveled here from all over the world to receive training and to shoot with me, to have me teach them how to do what I do. The level of uncompromise that I have when it comes to being able to shoot the absolute smallest and being able to shoot very finite targets very far away. Most people in the industry that have worked with me will tell you that I am uncompromising to the point that they cannot even get along with me. My demands are so great that it will generally chase people off that want to have any kind of professional dealing with me. I literally won't let them get away with making mistakes, ever. I will hold their feet to the fire so diligently for such a long period of time that it becomes just exhausting working with me. Now, this is not a fact that I hide or shy away from. This is who I am. What I am is an extraordinarily uncompromising precision rifle perfectionist. And I am constantly pressuring into this, trying to figure out what I can possibly do to improve. That is me. That's who I am. I don't intend to change that fact. Now, I have had my personal Prometheus since 2015. And obviously, Brand Cole, at that time, I didn't know who he was. I just learned about this Prometheus thing over the internet, and I wanted to check one out. So I looked into it, and everything about it just made sense. Like, wow, if this thing can actually do what it's claiming to do, then it will be a big improvement over what I'm using. And at the time, I was using the original Chargemaster 1500 combo, and I had like 2 or 3 of those things sitting on my bench in order to be able to keep up, specifically because they were always overthrowing or doing something, and that was after I did a bunch of modifications to them. Some of my earliest videos were, and articles were teaching people how to modify and improve upon the RCBS Chargemaster 1500 combo. I was really excited at the prospect of improving upon that. So I called and I spoke with Brand at Prometheus, and I ended up ordering a unit. And I think it was sometime in 2015 that I took possession of the thing. Now, immediately after getting this thing, and I'm talking the first 100 rounds that I loaded on this thing, I felt a marked improvement in my performance. And that means that when I was shooting at 100 yards, and at the time I was shooting a lot at 100 yards, and so a ton of paper and close, so environmental variables weren't as much of a consideration. And I started noticing very immediately in that first 100 rounds a marked reduction in flyers. But over time, sure enough, I did see a demonstrable shrinking of my groups and less deviation from my point of aim. So better precision and better accuracy. I mean, I've probably gone through, a dozen different electronic scales and powder trickling and delivery mechanisms. And one thing has been a constant throughout all of this, and that is the electronic scale drift, or the untrustworthiness of the digital readout on the electronic scale. And thus far, the only way that I saw that improve was if I spent greater than $2,000 on a digital balance. And I'm not talking about like a kit or something that has powder delivery. I'm just talking about a regular scale, a balance. In order to make these things work to their best, you have to have an enclosed chamber. You have to put your charge in there. You'd have to have a bulk charge out of a powder thrower, stick it in there, close the door, and then you'd have to have a little trickler mechanism or something, or a little electronic trickler mechanism that you would trickle the charge. Once it's done, you've got to open it up, go in there, and take it out. And it's really just a kind of archaic process. Which brings me to my next point. Even when I found myself, I put these digital balances behind a Furman power conditioner and an uninterruptible battery backup system with power conditioning. And so, like, the cleanest power, had them isolated on a granite slab and had all the little special noise canceling things in the power line. Even then, it would fluctuate. But let's just say that I had one, it was pretty much on an even keel, and it was relatively stable. Well, that brings us to the next point. Powder handling, right? All of these types of things require the manual movement of powder from some type of weighing tray or receptacle, right? Little cup of some kind. And you've got to take that thing manually and then dump it into a funnel manually. Now, I had to lay out a big sheet, right? A big white bed sheet, essentially, all around my reloading scale. And I sat and loaded 100 rounds. And folks, I was super deliberate and very slow and methodical about how I was pouring this powder into my funnel and then subsequently into my case. And despite the fact that I was being ultra careful about this, when I was done with that 100 round session, I found rogue kernels laying around on top of this white sheet that I had just brought in, brand new, and just put out there. Where did they come from? Well, the closest I can figure is while I'm very delicately swirling this powder into this funnel and into this case, some kernels were like ricocheting. They were catching on something or bouncing off of each other and just ricocheting out at light speed. I couldn't even see them with my naked eye. So I brought some big lights, right? The same lights that I use for photography and other things. I set them lights up, and lo and behold, I saw it with my eye. I was very diligently pouring this, swirling this powder into the funnel, and bing, I saw one singular kernel of powder go flying across the room. And I didn't see where it went, but I saw it leave, and after that, I kind of had a moment of epiphany, like, wow, okay, these powder kernels are cylindrical in shape, most of them, and they've got, per their size and weight, they've got a relatively sharp edge on them, and it catches things, and they tumble and flip and go flying around. When I did finally sit down and think about it, it made perfect sense. Like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure, it would be that way, wouldn't it? I mentioned before a little bit about the lengths that I went to try to clean the power and make sure there's no power fluctuations going into the scale, make sure it was uninterrupted power supply, make sure that it was always on so that the electronics were always warmed up in there and giving good readings. Obviously, a digital balance, if it's sitting there off and then you just turn it on, well, it's not going to give the same reading after it warms up that it did when it was brand new and cold. Things like little granite surfaces to make sure everything is perfectly level and straight. And I mean, the lengths that I would go to try to wrangle all of these problems to get any of these digital balances, including the one that I have right now, to get them to behave themselves and to stop moving around and drifting and just being chaotic and unpredictable. Literally nothing that I have been able to do has eliminated the problem. Seemed like just about everything I did made some tiny, almost imperceptible, small improvement. Next day, I would come in here and turn the lights on and, oh, look, my scale is reading out something different. Why does it have a different number on it now and nobody's touched it? Nothing's happened. Nobody's interfaced with it. And no weight is put on it. And it's got a different number on it now. So what do? Well, you just re-zero it, right? Well, how do you know what number is actually right? So you load 100 rounds on it, and then it drifts, and now it says something else when you put the empty pan back on the balance. And so you just re-zero it. And you do that again after it does it again after 50 rounds or 300 rounds or from one session to the next. The fact that it's doing it means that, hey, what's going on in there mechanically isn't being shown to you in truth what's going on digitally. Now, this ghost in the machine problem that has plagued these digital balances for my entire use of them, my entire career, I can explain it technically. I understand what's taking place depending on whether it's a magnetic force restoration or a strain gauge type scale, and what the power delivery circuitry inside the unit is doing, and how the actual control board is programmed to isolate what it perceives as noise from actual weight. Technically, I can explain what's going on here. Now, introduce the powder delivery systems, right? The tricklers. They all have some weird tendency about them. They all struggle to put the correct amount of powder in these things. We're weighing charges by weight. We're not weighing by volume. And they all struggle to hit the number that they're supposed to hit. They do not reliably solve the problem of moving these kernels of propellant around. And so you're constantly struggling with overthrows or underthrows. With all of them, it's always something. Now, you've heard me carry on about these electronic systems, right? I absolutely hate them. There's not one of them right now that I could safely say, hey, buy this, and that problem won't need to be readdressed in the future. You're good. Not a one of them. Not if you want to shoot the way you see me shooting in my YouTube content all the time. You're just not going to be able to consistently do what I do from round to round, from batch to batch, from session to session. Because your tool that you're using to measure these charges is constantly moving around on you, and most of you don't even know it's happening. So enter the Prometheus. Very awesome green glow that you see behind me has solved all of those problems and has done so from the very moment that I set it up. That scale has not drifted at all from the time I mounted it to this bench. It is a mechanical balance beam. It is the most finely tuned mechanical balance beam that I have ever seen. Like, you can drop a kernel of 8208 on that pan and you can see that balance beam physically move quite a lot. Now, I'm going to show you what it looks like when you drop a single kernel of Varget on this thing. By pressing this little red button up here, I can trickle one singular kernel of Varget into this weighing tray. There's one. There's two. Yeah, there's one singular kernel, one piece of Varget, and you can see that that beam moves by that much. So it is the most precise method of measuring a charge that I have ever seen. And what about the power cleanliness? Well, this thing is completely isolated. The electricity, all that does is perform the automated functions, right? All that does is drive the trickler and it shines the light and runs the sensors. There is no weighing done by the electricity. So it doesn't matter. As long as it's plugged in and it's getting power, it'll run. Then guess what, folks? If the power goes out, I can still use it. Yeah, I can still use it, and it will still weigh charges. All I need to do is get a little prism and hook it up to the side of the thing, a magnification, so I can see the needle in the back here. If I can see that little needle with my eye, I can still use the scale. Well, what about wind drift or electromagnetic interference? Yeah, no, it doesn't do that either. The thing is completely sealed inside of a box, and it's made out of materials that don't readily react with magnets. If you're starting to think that the guy that designed this thing must be a genius, yeah, you're right. Brad Cole is a good friend of mine, and I can firmly attest to that man's intelligence. And you can see that in every single aspect of the Prometheus's design. Every part, every alignment, every shape, it has been thought about and gone over more than most people would ever give credit for or understand. This is all dumped right into the case. That means when it's done weighing this charge to the kernel, and I don't mean advertised to the kernel, I mean the scale's actually capable of it. It will not drift on a whim. It's actually capable of, to the kernel, every single charge that you throw with it. When it's done weighing that charge, you dump it right into the case. The Prometheus dumps it into a funnel, which your case is shoved into, and it goes immediately into the case. And it doesn't have an opportunity to ricochet out. Now, when I'm using the Prometheus, there'll be some loose kernels laying in the top, like up on the floor of the Prometheus, but those aren't coming from the charge that's going into the case. Those happen when the bulk charge gets thrown into the weighing tray out of the little tube. Every once in a while, some kernels will hit and ricochet off of the stopper ball little stem. There's a wire in there that holds the stopper ball up. And that stopper ball wire, the kernels come flying past it, and every once in a while, one will ricochet out. So you'll collect some kernels on the floor of the Prometheus in there. But those are not coming from the actual weighed charge that goes into your case. So that means the charge that you get in your case is the charge that you saw being weighed. It doesn't ricochet out. It can't escape and get away like that. It goes straight into the case, all of it. So I did the same little sheet test where I laid the white sheet out around the Prometheus and I loaded 100 rounds, and there was no kernels anywhere. No kernels landed anywhere but inside my case. Folks, if money was not a concern to anybody, literally every single precision rifle shooter out there would be running a Prometheus. There wouldn't even be a also ran. There would be no second place. Every single shooter would be running a Prometheus and nothing else, because there is nothing else like it that can do this job in that way with as much certainty. The cases where you're going to see the Prometheus provide the most benefit are those cases where you're dealing with charge weights that are under 40 grains. The lower you get in charge weight, the more significance a over or under charge is going to have in your downrange performance. So if you're talking about like 223 sized cases where you're dealing with, 25, 26 grains of powder, 27 grains of powder, then it can have a very large effect on your downrange performance. If you're loading 85 grains of powder, well, the Prometheus is going to have less of an impact there, because most of those large cartridges are working with very large and heavy kernels. And two, the overall load volume dictates that being off by a couple of kernels is going to show up a lot less when you're doing large cases. So that is one place that I have absolutely seen a huge performance advantage to loading on the Prometheus, is when I'm using 223 sized cases. Because I shoot a lot of 223 Ackley and 223 Ackley and those kinds of things. Also do a lot of BR, BRA, and Dasher cases. And folks, I'm here to tell you that those examples, every variation of every cartridge that I've worked with in those small cases, I have seen a distinct performance advantage that is able to be seen relatively easily if you compare the Prometheus to some of these other electronic scales and methods. I set up a camera to watch this scale. I wasn't even in the room, folks. I was somewhere else. The door was shut, the air conditioner was not running, and look at this scale. It's just doing whatever it wants, just randomly giving out different numbers. Let's do something fun. I've got a fan. I'm going to aim that at our two different scales here, and we're going to see how air currents affect what's going on. There, we're trained on the electronic scale, so I'm just going to use my breath. Like, look at that. I'm not even doing anything. I'm like 4 feet away from the scale. What caused it to move like that? But here I am. I'm just going to blow past this thing, right? I'm like 5 feet away from this reloading bench and just blowing with my mouth. And this side is closed, folks. This side is open. This is the only side that's open. Now I'm going to kick the fan on low. And I'm blowing at this side, folks. I'm blowing at the closed side. And that's on low. All right, let's kick it up to high. If I had this thing turned to the front of my bench, it would be even worse. Okay, same test from the same distance, except here's the Prometheus. And now the fan on low. And now the fan on high. Straight into the case. Now this is the part where we go down to the comments of this video and there's well, so-and-so is won countless bench rest championships and he doesn't use a Prometheus and he seems to be fine. And
this so-and-so, he's got F-class championships and he's fine.
And I've been reloading for 97 years and I don't have a Prometheus and I shoot just fine.
Folks, I don't care. Okay, I do not care what you think about this. This video is for those of you out there that can understand what I am talking about here and want that problem solved permanently. This is not about you or anyone else trying to justify their actions to someone else. This is about the purity of this discipline and the pursuit of the truth within it, and simply acknowledging that some pieces of equipment are vastly superior to others. Now, if you want to have the price discussion and the value discussion, like, great. Have those discussions with someone else. I don't care. I don't want to talk about it. The reality of my uncompromising pursuit of the truth of this discipline requires that I simply do not hold any relevance towards the cost of something. Because if anything, the Prometheus has saved me money, because my endless pursuit of trying to get this powder handling issue solved ended the day that I bought it. Literally, the only reason why I play with these other new models that keep coming out is because I understand that there's a bunch of you out there that will never be able to justify the expense of a Prometheus to yourself. It doesn't matter that that's true. I'm fine with that. But also doesn't change the fact that the Prometheus is the best possible solution to the problem that's out there right now. So if you want to keep justifying it to yourself and keep having the value proposition discussion in your own mind, well then, hey, great, I encourage you to do that. These machines are like a work of art. The number of handcrafted, hand-tuned parts that are in them. Folks, these things should cost $15,000. The kind of quality that you're getting in this machine, by modern standards, these things should be $15,000, $20,000. I don't even know what they should actually cost. I know the amount of work, effort, and love that goes into building each one of these machines. It is a small price to ask. Personally, I know that I would have paid 2 or 3 times what Brand is asking for these units to solve this problem as succinctly as the Prometheus has solved it for me. We're talking about what is the absolute, uncompromising, best possible device to weigh charges and get that weighed charge into your case as effortlessly and precisely as possible. And the Prometheus does that and has done that since the very day that I bought it, And I imagine will continue doing that for the rest of my life. So there is no justification needed for me. And those of you that are picking up the phone to call Brand right now, yeah, you're probably not the type to justify yourself to anyone else either.